Good morning and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and my guest today is Bill Kuwik of Fredonia Massage Therapy, but he's not here to talk about that today. He's here to talk about growing mushrooms. But first I wanted to bring up how I first met Bill, which was quite a number of years ago, at least a couple of decades we were thinking. We were in the same yoga class. Do you remember we were in the old part of the Westfield Hospital there before they tore it down?
And then we
up in the
moved the big table.
I was going to say, yeah, we had to move this great big heavy table, and it was it was really big and heavy. It took the whole class to move it.
Honestly, I mean, you're not kidding. I mean, I remember there would be like 6 of us going to lift this. It was like the boardroom table or something like that.
Yeah, it was the boardroom, so we always had to put it back so if they wanted to use the room, the table would be where they wanted it.
Exactly.
And then I remember one time you stepped on a thumbtack while we were moving the table. Do you remember that?
Now that you mention it, did not, but yes.
So, anyways, one of the things that I really remember about being in the same class as you is one day Darielle had us talking about visualization. And I remember telling about a visualization I used to do when I was a little girl, where I would, if it was a really cold night, this would be something I do at bedtime if it was like down below 0 or something out, and I couldn't seem to get warm, I would visualize myself as wearing a winter coat on the hottest summer day, and it would actually help me feel warmer. And then I mentioned that that on the really hot summer nights, the worst ones, I would visualize myself as wearing a bathing suit outside in the coldest winter weather, and that's how I would make myself cool off.
There you go.
So I could go to sleep. But I remember you making a comment about it, that it reminded you of some movie.
You know, it's funny because while you were saying that, I was just thinking it was actually the Kung Fu series from back in the 70s that, and I actually have the whole box set of all 3 seasons. But yeah, Kane or. The actor, they were forced because they did something wrong in this mining town that they were in. The punishment was they had to sit in a steel box, and he goes in there and gets into his meditative state. And there's another guy who's not a Shaolin monk, goes in there with him, and the other guy is just like breathing hard, and it's really hot in there, and he says to him, "Don't you feel the heat, Chinaman?" And Kane says, "All I feel is the breeze on the back of my neck." And so, yeah, I guess.
I was hoping you'd remember that you said that.
Yeah,
then,
yeah. Well, as soon as you said that, it just came right to me.
You know, because I thought, I was thinking about that when I knew you were going to be coming on, and I just thought it would be fun to talk about it.
Well, that's a good point, though, too. I mean, really, our mind does control a lot of our health, and I always say, you know, when people come to me for massage therapy, it always makes a big difference if they believe in me, and sometimes the results are near miraculous when someone has told someone, "Oh, you really need to go see Bill, he will fix your problem," and then I really barely start and they think I've done something really great, and I'm like, I really hardly did anything yet, but well,
you know, I remember in yoga class sometimes Darielle would have us pair off, and she would to give each other massages.
Oh, right.
And I remember it almost seemed like some of the students were practically fighting over who was going to be with your partner because they knew you were a professional.
Right. Well, I guess if you do it enough, you get better at it. But.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we better get down to the brass tacks of talking about mushrooms, since this is what I invited you here to do.
Right. Well, I guess I mean I do grow mushrooms, but I guess I more think about the medicinal values of them, and I know that I can just say, like, right off the bat, that right off the top, that all mushrooms actually have a medicinal property. And when I went out to, well, I flew to Seattle, but I drove to, it's a little town called Camilchi Point, where Fungi Perfecti Paul Stamets' business is. It's just a small farm. It's closer to Olympia, actually, but when we were taking the class, which is called Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms, I think it was on the second day, somebody said, well, now, which mushrooms are the gourmet mushrooms and which mushrooms are the medicinal ones? And Paul kind of laughed and he said, well, really, he said, the more that we're studying them, the more we're finding out that all mushrooms have some medicinal qualities to them. So even your white button mushrooms that you would get at the grocery store, portobellos, everything has an immune enhancing effect. I mean, some more than others. And for instance, I have this lion's mane mushroom that I brought today, this extract, and that actually has been shown to have they call it a nerve growth regenerating factor in it. So he used to call it liquid intelligence, but it actually has he says now I believe it even says on here, for memory and nerve support. So he actually told us a story where there was a politician near him in Washington State who got so embarrassed to actually do any public speaking because he had Parkinson's so bad, his shaking was so bad, he wouldn't do any public speaking. And he said, I believe he said that after 2 months of taking it, Paul ran into the politician's wife at a grocery store, and she said, she goes, he actually is feeling more confident now. The shaking has actually gone away by taking that one particular mushroom extract. And I have actually grown the lion's mane mushroom. It's like a little white pom-pom kind of a thing.
And does it look like it has a lion's mane?
It's like a white puffy ball, basically, and it is very hairy. You wouldn't almost think that it would be something edible, and it's really like a choice edible too. If I usually just cut it up into maybe half-inch slices, a little olive oil, a little butter, a little salt and pepper, and some people say it tastes like lobster. Some people say it tastes like seafood. So either way, it's a choice edible. So I think you could actually find it in the wild in New York State. Too. I know in southern states for sure, and I'm pretty sure here. I've never found any wild, but I have grown them, and I've actually grown them on something as simpler as like aspen, poplar trees, which because it's a soft hardwood, the mycelial run will go through very quickly. They don't last for years and years, like maybe 2 years, because once the bark falls off, you don't really get the wood will dry out so much that you won't get mushrooms to grow off of it. But and even another thing, one that I grow a lot of, and I grow oyster mushrooms on straw, several different kinds of mushrooms, oyster mushrooms on straw, which I had built my own straw pasteurizer. It's just a 55-gallon drum with a strainer in it, and you pasteurize to like 160, 180 degrees for 35 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and then I build a bed, which essentially I do it on the north side of my house, and I put down the black, like the landscape fabric to keep the weeds down, and then I'll put a layer, maybe an inch and a half of that pasteurized straw on top of that. I buy the mushroom spawn, so it's grain, and it has that particular spawn in it. Spread a little layer of that over the top of that straw, another layer of straw, another layer of spawn, another layer of straw, one more layer of spawn, and then I cover that with a clear sheet of plastic. I usually just put bricks around it. And the beds are, I want to say 10 feet by roughly 3 feet, and depending on the temperatures, within a week or two, that straw will turn just like as white as this paper. The mycelium will grow all the way through it, and then I use that same sheet of plastic, and very simply I put 2 concrete blocks on either end of the bed, 2 pieces of half-inch rebar over the top of it, drape the plastic over it, and still keep my bricks on it so there's air can get through to either side. And then usually once, maybe twice a day, I open up the tent and spray it with a mist of water with the hose, and within a week you have oyster mushrooms. And I also do that on those poplar logs, but you can do it drill and fill, but I usually do the totem stacks, which is you take a black plastic contractor bag, 1 cup of the spawn in the bottom, you take a log section. So you would have a log maybe 36, maybe 40 inches long and about a foot around. So you would take the first section of log and set that onto the cup of spawn that you put in, another cup of spawn, another log piece, another cup of spawn, a slab of log piece for the top of that, another cup of spawn. Then you cover that with a sheet of newsprint or a brown paper bag, bring the garbage bag up all around it, tie it off, and depending on the type of wood and the variety of mushroom, you would let that sit for anywhere from 1 to 2 months to maybe even a year. But when you take the bag away, the log will be just covered with white mycelia, and then one of Paul's sayings is then it's just benign neglect. So you might water them or you just sort of ignore them for a while, but you want to keep track that mushrooms might start to grow on them. But on the straw, I mean, you can really, 1 week of spawn run, 1 week for the mushrooms to start, and so really in about 3 weeks you can get oyster mushrooms, which the oyster mushrooms are very easy to grow, very common. I know usually you can find them at Wegmans, but one study that I read, women with breast cancer in China, after they went through their chemotherapy, they were given, one set were given just the oyster mushrooms, and their percentage of recurrence of the cancer was only 30% of the women who didn't eat the mushroom extract. But if you ate, or not the extract, they were just eating oyster mushrooms, but if you ate oyster mushrooms, if they ate oyster mushrooms and drank, it was a certain exact measurement of green tea every day. It was almost zero amount of recurrence of that particular type of breast cancer. So even the simple and very easy to grow oyster mushroom does have a medicinal effect like that.
I really like those oyster mushrooms too.
Oh, yeah.
They're
Yeah.
really delicious.
Oh yeah, I like to cook with them all the time. Yeah, I mean they're easy to grow too. So I mean, if anybody is ever interested in growing any, I mean I can coach anybody if they want to. But easy on straw. There is a method in the Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms book by Paul where he says you don't have to actually pasteurize the straw. You can just let the straw ferment in water for, I want to say it's 3 days, and then he says immediately inoculate it. I tried it, and it is simple, but it was so full of other kinds of fungus and stuff that I would say out of a normal bed, when I do it with the pasteurization process, I will get in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 pounds of mushrooms off a bed like that. If I got 8 pounds off of the fermenting method, it was a lot. So maybe, roughly a quarter. So simpler, easier, yes, but you really don't get that much.
Not as good
Right,
somehow. It
right,
just
right.
doesn't work out as well.
Right, exactly. I mean, there is a method too, which I've never used, but you can use food grade hydrogen peroxide to sterilize the straw for growing mushrooms on. But I do like logs, and I mentioned the drill and fill method. You can use, I did that with the poplar logs for the lion's mane that we mentioned, and then I've done that with shiitake. And essentially, there's a special drill bit, and instead of using a drill, which I want to say a regular drill is 1,000 to 1,200 RPMs, you use an angle grinder with a special chuck on it, and that is about 10 times faster, so it's like 10,000 to 12,000 RPM. And whereas with a drill, you might be like, to drill the hole. This is just like zoom, zoom. I mean, it really goes like super fast. But if you had a log here, you would just drill a row with shiitake about every 4 inches, with the oysters maybe every 2 inches. Then you'd spin the log and make kind of a diamond pattern all the way around. And then I have a palm inoculator. It's just a brass tube with a handle on the top. And what I was told by Paul is you stab that into your spawn 3 times so it packs it into the little hole in the end. Then you put that over the hole that you just drilled and hit it 3 times so it packs it in really good. And then you dab some wax onto the end of those. And I always wax my ends. Some people don't, but I dip the ends of the logs in the hot wax too. And then I know a couple of years ago I had a couple of Tibetan Buddhist kids from California that were helping me, and we did in the neighborhood of about 50 shiitake logs. I had a hard maple tree fall down on my property, so I was like, well, I've got logs, so I guess I'll use them for that. And we did them in maybe April of the year that they were working with me, and then the next year, about that time, roughly like April, May, I said, boy, I should probably unstack those mushrooms so they'll grow. And there were already some mushrooms coming off of those. And I mean, I kind of attributed it to, maybe I'm wrong, to the Tibetan Buddhist energy, but I've never seen shiitake mushrooms this big. I had some that were literally almost 8 inches across. So they did really well on that. But
that is really big, isn't it?
Yeah.
8-inch shiitake mushrooms.
I actually last year had a couple. They were a little bit past their prime, so they got a little wider than they should have. But I literally gave a couple to someone, and they were as wide as a gallon Ziploc bag. They just barely fit into a gallon Ziploc, which I think those are roughly 12 inches or so. So, but yeah, and you know, we were talking earlier about the benefits of shiitake too. That there are a lot of immune enhancing effects of the shiitake mushroom too. And since we're talking about immune system, I know that the turkey tail mushroom, which is the most common weed fungus around me and probably all around Chautauqua County, if I cut soft maple and put a log on the ground or just leave something and forget it, by the end of the summer there will be Treveti's versicolor or the turkey tail mushroom growing on it. Now I know some people refer to it as trail gum. They will actually just pick it and eat it, chew on it while they go for a hike. But Paul actually said, he said, you can do that. He says, maybe you get a little bit of something off it, but it's really not so much, like, I've shown it to people and they're like, that's edible? It's like, well, technically medicinal, not edible, because it's a shelf fungus, so it's really kind of tough and really kind of hard and more, it would be like eating a piece of bark, essentially, if you wanted to eat it. And I don't know if there's any way to cook it, but the way to harvest it, if you want it for medicine, is to harvest it more towards the fall and then dry it and then break it up into small pieces and boil it as a tea. And really with mushrooms, when you're making a tea, because they're hard and the nutrients and all the polysaccharides and things that are beneficial to them are deep in the substance of it, you really have to cook them, like boil for 20 minutes, not just steep for 15 or 20 minutes. So you really do need to boil those. But yeah, so you just boil that. And the one point I was going to make is that Paul's mother, she ended up with a particular type of breast cancer, and she was 82 years old. And by the time she got a hold of Paul about it, he said that her left breast was 5 times the size of her right breast. And he kept telling her, Mom, take the turkey tail mushroom extract. Well, she went to whatever the big cancer institute is in Seattle, and they said, well, at your age, there really, surgery is not, you're not a candidate for surgery, and there really was no chemo for that particular type of breast cancer. So the doctor sent her to Bastyr College of Naturopathic Medicine, and they were actually doing a study with the turkey tail, and the woman in charge said, well, she says, we've had excellent success with that particular type of breast cancer with the turkey tail mushroom. And Paul's mother was very proud of the fact that he was supplying the mushrooms for the study, her son. But he said that, I want to say, whatever the dosage is that he recommends for maintenance, she just doubled that. So it was either 4 capsules a day or 8 capsules a day. And within a year, she went into complete remission. And at the time that I was there taking the class, it had been 4 years. So she went from 82 years old to 86 years old and was in complete remission just by taking that turkey tail mushroom extract. And like I said, it grows wild all around here, so wouldn't be hard for someone to find. Although, let me make that very clear point that if you're going to hunt wild edible mushrooms, Paul said you can't be 75% sure, you can't be 95% sure. He says not even 99% sure. He says you really need to be 100% sure, and you really have to have a real good field guide. You have to, I really believe you have to take a spore print, and I actually have a little magnifier so you can actually see the size of the spore, the color of the spore, and the shape of the spore to be 100% sure. And I guess I'm a testament to the fact that I am not dead from eating wild mushrooms, so I haven't eaten a deadly one yet.
Well, I'm not going to name any names, but I did see a couple of people have what looked like an LSD trip one time after eating some mushrooms. They'd gone out and picked themselves. It was pretty wild.
It wasn't intentional, I guess.
They thought they knew what they were doing, but it was pretty nutty, you know.
I know that like some people tell me that there are varieties that do that around here, but according to things I've read, it's extremely rare. And kind of a funny story related to that. My friend Mark, who lives in Seattle, told me when I was out there that there was a rumor going around, because I don't know if you know this, but Paul Stamets, who wrote all these books, is actually good personal friends with Andrew Weil, the
Oh, is he really?
Healing.
Oh,
Yeah, they went to
yeah.
college together at Washington State University. Well, there was a rumor going around that there was these power relay stations on the hills in Seattle, and the rumor back in the 70s was that Paul and Andrew Weil had seeded those wood-chipped areas with hallucinogenic mushroom spawn, because there was hallucinogenic mushrooms coming up all summer there, and everybody just figured that it was them. But actually in this mycelium running book, he actually says that it's very rare, even in Washington State, that hallucinogenic mushrooms grow in the wild. He says very seldom. He said you might find some right on the very coast. He said, but he says for some reason, he said they seem to tend to follow human activity, and whenever you find the beauty mulch around, he says around public buildings, government buildings, he says that's where you will usually find it. But there's another book of his that I did not bring, but he said that his cousin was actually looking for a particular type of hallucinogenic mushroom in the Seattle area, and and this is, I think, where that story comes from, but he said that his cousin called him one day, and Paul was writing a manuscript. He was living in a cabin like north of Seattle someplace, and the cousin said that he thought he found this. So Paul said, well, I hate to try to identify a mushroom over the phone. He said, but I know you're smart. I know what you know we're doing. So he says, well, is there an attached gill? He says, attached gill. He described the mushroom to him, and he says, well, it sounds like you got the right one. He said, but let me come down tomorrow morning, and I'll look at it for sure. So he described a round table about the size of this, and he said when he showed up, table was full of these mushrooms. He's like, that's the one. So he says, where did you find them? He says, you're not going to believe it. He said, well, are there more? He says, you're not going to believe it. Well, they drove someplace right across the street from a police station, apparently, and Paul said there was more concrete and asphalt than there was any kind of natural areas. And he's like, well, where would this? And it was one of these power relay stations covered with wood chips all over the ground. And he said there was this massive fruiting of about 50 feet by 50 feet, and it was covered with these hallucinogenic mushrooms. So apparently they went to work to try to harvest as many of those as possible, but there's more to the story I'll leave out here.
Oh, you can't say it on TV.
Well, I guess I could. It's interesting, actually. I'll tell you. It's really, because Paul said he realized that time does not flow in a linear fashion like we believe, because they all took an amount of them that day, made smoothies apparently, and Paul said later that night he went to bed, but he woke up the next morning and he was just like, there was this intense feeling of he had a dream that there was just this intense foreboding, like he said something bad, something really bad is going to happen. And he said in his dream that he had, it's so realistic that he said the rivers were all flooded. He said he was like frantically trying to get back to his cabin for some reason. And he said he kept getting turned around, and the last turn he made to get to his cabin, the river was full of, it was a swollen river full of dead, bloated cows. And he says, I don't know what's going to happen. I said, I don't know if the Russians are going to bomb us and it's going to melt the snow up on Mount Rainier, and that's why we're going to get all this flooding. So all these college guys sort of laughed it off, and they're like, and he's like, 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 weeks from today. So they're like, okay. So they wrote on the calendar, December 1st, Paul says Armageddon. So they all laughed it off. Well, apparently the end of November that year, strangely, they don't usually get snow in Seattle, but they got a ton of snow in the last days of November. And just before December 1st, the temperatures started to rise and they started getting a lot of rain, and there was a lot of flooding. Well, Paul said that he was hurrying to try to get back to his cabin because he said his his cabin was only so many feet above flood stage. He says all of his books and all of his manuscripts were there in the cabin, so he was hurrying back to get there, and he said he kept on getting turned around. He said, no, can't go this way, the bridge is closed, can't get there. And he said the last turn he made just before he got to the cabin, he said he had to go about 100 miles out of his way to get to that cabin. And he said the last turn he made, the river was swollen and full of dead, bloated cows. So
You mean, okay, so he had the dream, but it actually happened?
yeah, he had the dream 2 weeks before and said something bad is going to happen. And on the day that he predicted that it was going to happen, it actually happened.
Oh,
So,
gosh. So you think that that hallucinogenic mushrooms can kind of give you psychic powers?
Well, I'd maybe open some sort of portal for him, I guess. But I can't say for sure. But he just said that he felt that that was an experience of how, he really literally experienced it 2 weeks before. So it was, way, just like he said, showing that time does not necessarily flow in a linear fashion like that.
Yeah, I remember when I was a teenager, I had a time-traveling experience one time. I basically, was in one place, and then I was 2 days later, and, just while I was wide awake, it wasn't a dream or anything, and I saw something happen, and then I snapped back to the first day, and then... and then 2 days later,
It happened.
It really happened. It was just a weird experience that I had. So I do think that it is possible to,
Right.
just from personal experience. Of course, I was not eating mushrooms at the time before it happened.
Or not
though. I
that
mean,
you were
that was
aware
just
of,
something. Yeah, sometimes things happen that you can't really explain. You
Right,
know.
right.
So.
Well, back to the health benefits of mushrooms, other than the fun benefits. I was going to say too, though, a friend of mine called me recently about. She asked me, she knows I know a lot about mushrooms, so she wanted to know if there was mushrooms that were good for lung and bone cancer. And I immediately, right off the bat, said, well, I can tell you right now that I don't think, bone cancer, once it gets that deep into your body, I've never even heard of a mushroom that was good for bone cancer. And I actually have this list here, which has mushrooms with activities for specific cancer, and there is nothing on here for bone cancer. But I told her, I said, I can tell you right off the bat that the cordyceps, which is here too, he says it's for energy support, which I take this every day. The one thing about it that I discovered myself was I usually have, my doctor always says I have perfect blood pressure, but when I was taking a full dose of this, even just once a day, I once had to go get some blood work done at the hospital, and they said, your blood pressure is a little low, and I'm usually maybe like 116 over 68 or something like that. And I said, what is it? And they said, you're 102 over 52. And both of my parents had high blood pressure, so everybody always tells me I will eventually get it, but it hasn't. But I thought that was a little bit odd. But then went to my doctor's office some months later, and he checked my blood pressure. He's like, blood pressure's a little low. I'm like, what is it? He said, it's 100 over 50. And then I actually ran out, and I got my blood pressure checked, and I was back to my normal again. And I thought, that's really kind of funny, because I didn't know that could, but it almost seems like that lowered my blood pressure. Well, I looked it up in this Mycomedicinals informational book that Paul and his wife Dusty made, and they actually say that when you're under stress, that the cordyceps mushroom actually increases the volume of the aorta, so the same volume of blood is being pumped, but since the vessel is more open and more relaxed, it actually lowers the pressure. And I didn't know that when I was taking it, but I kind of figured it out on my own before I actually read it. But actually that, like I said, it's for energy support, but one of the things that it's known for, it's actually a true tonic mushroom, but there's this chart here, which is a cross index of mushrooms and the targeted therapeutic effects, and it's antibacterial, anti-tumor, anti-cancer, antiviral. It's a blood sugar modulator and blood pressure, as we said. It's good for your cardiovascular system, cholesterol reducer, immune enhancer, kidney tonic, liver tonic. It's good for your lung and respiratory, but also nerve tonic. But so I figured for the person with lung cancer, it was good. And on this, and so I told her that right off the bat, but I looked it up, and there are a total of 5 that are good for that. But something that I looked up in another book that I usually talk about is it's David Shiver's it's Anti-Cancer Diet and Lifestyle. But he was talking about people with lung cancer and using turmeric, and he said that people who actually still have lung cancer but take turmeric on a regular basis, the cancer cells just do not grow. The tumors will actually stay small on turmeric, but he said that if you add black pepper to that, it actually increases the efficacy of the turmeric by 2,000%. And they say that if you add ginger to that, it's 4 times greater than that. So turmeric is good, but if you use black pepper and ginger with that, it actually increases the efficacy of something like 8,000% over just the turmeric alone. And I know Darielle's having that Ayurvedic cooking class at her place today, which I was thinking.
Oh, today?
It was at, I think it started at 11 to 2 or something. I
didn't even know about it.
But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of really good health benefits. So we've known for years that the Indian Indian diet, with because it's got turmeric, it's got peppers, it's got ginger in it, and all those things good for inflammation. But I know for a fact that turmeric is anti-tumor, anti-cancer, and I actually someone who's into Ayurveda told me recently, I've actually started brushing my teeth with turmeric powder. It's actually supposed to help with gum disease, and it's supposed to be very beneficial for all of your mouth health in general. So
I know the cancer research people and the doctors in the section of the medical profession that treat cancer patients, they don't really apparently want people to know all this stuff.
Yeah, it's the medical industry. And in fact, I probably shouldn't even say this. I won't mention the name of a local cancer institute, but a friend of mine is he's a genetic engineer, as is his wife, at this place, and it's in breast cancer research is what they do. And he actually told me that there's a particular doctor there that he knew there was a procedure that this woman would benefit by, but the hospital said no, so he referred her someplace else, saved her life, and that hospital had him come in for a little talk, and they told him, you ever do that again, you're fired. So,
well, I know of somebody that got fired from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute. He was in the public relations department, and he got fired because he had published some articles about some natural, non-toxic therapies. They'd done some experiments with. They didn't want anybody to know about them.
Well, I'll tell you a few. Actually, in 2007, I ended up getting a couple of little skin things removed, and I was getting calls from 1 or 2 doctors once or twice a week for 10 weeks, and they said that they wanted me to be involved in this study because this one little thing that I had here was so rare that I was the either 36th or 37th known case in all of medical history to have ever had this. And they said, well, in this study, they're really encouraging me to be in this study. They said, you're gonna come in and we're gonna inject you with a radioactive dye. And I'm like, that's not gonna happen. But then a few days later, they said, you'll come back and then we'll check your groin and your armpit to see where this area drained into. And the Geiger counter would tell them that. And then they were going to go in and remove a few lymph nodes, and I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. And but then they said if they found the cells from this in the lymph nodes, then they would take out all of the lymph nodes in that area. And I'm just like, well, that's not going to happen. So it turned out that I didn't do anything. I didn't do any of the follow-up stuff. But I kept asking them if they wouldn't send me information on, what is the research on this particular rare thing. And one of them kept giving me a runaround. I was like, oh, well, you'd have to have access to medical websites and stuff like that. I'm like, well, couldn't you just send me a link? It's not that complicated, is it? Finally, one of them did, and it turned out that the previous people who had this problem, only one died of liver cancer, and he was an alcoholic and a heavy cigarette smoker. And I thought, I don't see why this is such a big deal that I should be doing this. And I kind of came to the conclusion on my own that it was probably more to benefit these doctors' careers down the road than it was for my health. So I didn't do anything about it, and I actually did go to. She's actually an MD, but she has like 5 medical licenses, and one is in nutritional medicine, one is in Ayurveda, and one is in Chinese medicine. But
And you finally got rid of it by going to her?
well, I mean, they removed it with the surgery, but
I see.
but no, I didn't really do anything about it after that because it didn't seem like it was a risk anyway. And she does this thing; it's called a bioimpedance test, where they put a little electrode on my wrist, one on my ankle, and they turn this machine on. It sends an electrical impulse through very quickly, and it can tell them a lot of information. First of all, whether you have cancer or not. It tells them whether your fluids in your body are within your cells or surrounding your cells. Tells them your body mass index, a lot of information in just like a real quick test like that. But she's like, you don't have any kind of cancer. But when I told her my theory about that they were using me, they were going to use me as the guinea pig to further their career, she says, I teach doctors at that hospital, and she says a lot of them, that's all they're interested in is their career and the money that they're going to make down the road. So she said, yeah, she goes, that's basically why they wanted me to be involved in that study like that. But like I said, it was, the whole experience was not good going there in general. But like I said, I never went back. And then, like I said, this was, it was like summer of '07. So it's been. And
nothing bad happened to you?
No, not yet.
Somebody passed me a note. They want me to ask you what are deadly mushrooms used for?
Well, actually, the deadly ones would be.
If you want to poison somebody,
right, yeah.
feed them
those
some
I don't think have any medicinal qualities.
No.
But
maybe they were wondering if they were used in chemotherapy or something.
I suppose there's a possibility of that, but I would stay away from the deadly mushrooms. And I know that a lot of people, some people do die every year from eating wild edibles, but it's my understanding that a lot of Asian people will die of eating wild mushrooms because there's a particular mushroom there that is a choice edible. But the most common lookalike here, and you could probably figure out just by the name, its nickname is the Death Angel. So
I've heard of it. Yeah. Well, is that what it is then? It looks just like a Chinese mushroom.
Right.
But those Chinese people come here.
Right.
And they think it's the same thing, so they eat it and die.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, and it's funny too because in one of these books by Paul, he says sometimes, like your friends who you said had that hallucinatory experience, he said sometimes, it's bizarre, he said, because he said there are mushrooms that are completely safe and edible for almost all people. And he talked about a young girl who had like a definite hallucinatory effect from a mushroom that is known to be a choice edible that many other, and there's never been another case known of anybody having that happen to them. And then they say sometimes other mushrooms will affect other people in that way. So who knows, maybe your friends just had a very rare experience with that. But it is interesting though too, and I have to say, I mean, this is how careful I will be sometimes if I'm not 100% sure, but I actually got a massage table stolen from me while I was helping someone with the gardens at Chautauqua a number of years ago, and I naively thought that it was going to get returned, but I was ordering 2 new massage tables, and I was on my computer, and I looked out, and there's a huge, probably 400-year-old oak tree just off of the edge of my property, and I could see the it's called the chicken of the woods mushroom. I
was just going to bring that up. It's really like fluorescent orange.
Yeah. It's because some people call it the sulfur tuft because on the bottom side it's bright yellow and on the top it's super bright orange. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw some in the woods one time a few years ago, and I'm going, what am I seeing? It was a short ways off in the distance. I thought maybe a forest fire was getting started or something. So I went and took a closer look, and it was just these mushrooms. And then at a later time, I asked an herbalist, I said, I saw these mushrooms growing on a dead tree that was laying down, and it was like fluorescent orange. It was like it was looked like it was glowing.
Yeah, easy one
and
to
she said
find.
it was called chicken in the woods.
Yeah.
And
some people confuse that because maitake.
but I still would not.
You would be.
I would still not go out and pick it and eat it,
Right,
because there
right.
might be something else that looks similar
and-
to chicken in the woods.
There is not. I actually looked it up. There's no dangerous lookalike at all. But this is how careful I was, though. I had to actually get an extension ladder to get up into the tree to get to where these were, because there was some limbs that were cut off of the tree, and that's where they were growing out of. So this tree is probably on its way out if mushrooms can grow that high up on it. But I actually have a picture on my phone of a huge specimen that I got. It would have been in maybe September of 2 years ago, so in 2014, and I was like, boy, this is great. I mean, this thing was like, it was probably like this and about like that, and I'm estimating in my mind, I'm thinking, I bet you that mushroom's got to weigh like 5 or 6 pounds. So when I figured it was at its maximum size before it started getting tough, I went out with a bread knife and I just started like sawing away, cutting all the way around it and trying to break it free and from underneath, and I thought possibly some of my restaurant clientele might be interested in it, because it is a choice edible. I mean, any way you cook it, it tastes like chicken, literally.
That's what
And,
I've heard. If
so-
you're vegan, but
Yeah.
you've gone vegan, you switched from, let's say, it would be something that you could eat if you still crave the taste of chicken.
And I know a lot of vegetarians and vegan people do that, but I sometimes, I mean, I guess I'm just being a jerk about it, but mushrooms are actually biologically closer to humans than they are to vegetables. So I mean, it's kind of a fine line if you're vegan. But anyway,
are you telling me it's cannibalistic to
yes,
eat mushrooms?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm kidding. But anyway, I cut that mushroom off that tree and I put it on my little produce scale, and it actually weighed 11 pounds. I was half of where I thought it should be. But the first time I ate it, like I said, I wasn't 100% sure. So I climbed up the ladder. I picked about a grocery bag full, and I cooked up like a small pan full of it, and I ate something that was maybe like half the size of a dime. I mean, everything that I read, the spore print indicated that it was the right mushroom, but I was like, I'm still not 100% sure, so I ate a little tiny piece of it. I should have waited 48 hours, but 24 hours later, I ate a piece that was maybe about the size of a quarter, and then 24 hours later, I was completely fine. So then I cooked up a whole pan full of them. But there was actually a log or a limb on the backside of the tree that had been cut off, maybe 3 feet by maybe 8 inches around, and I'm on the edge of a ravine with the step ladder, but I wasn't super crazy about it. I actually had there was maybe a 3-inch around tree that was holding up the ladder so it wouldn't kick out on me. But I actually climbed up there and filled multiple grocery bags. And whenever I picked wild mushrooms, I don't pick every last one. In fact, I might have taken a third of those, figuring I wanted the spores to spread, because there was a whole small oak forest right there. But that entire 3 feet by 8-inch limb was completely covered with those chicken of the woods mushrooms. But and actually, a friend of mine was cycling through, I'll just say, a park in Dunkirk last year, and he sent me a picture. I said, it looks like it, and he's a chef, so I like it so much that I actually bought some from him so I could have it, and then they did use it in the restaurant that he works at. So and actually, what I want to say too, though, with that, I know Paul said that some people will say that if the chicken of the woods mushroom grows on eucalyptus or some other types of tree, that you don't want to eat it because it could make you sick. And he actually says if you feel sick within an hour or two of eating a mushroom, he said it's not the mushroom that's making you sick. He said it's probably a bacteria that was growing on it. And that's a shelf-type mushroom, so it takes a long time for that to grow. I mean, that mushroom could be there for weeks. And you figure, something that's sitting on the side of a tree for weeks, it gets rained on, there's squirrels, chipmunks, birds and stuff around it. But
apparently, it's my understanding that all mushrooms should be cooked before eating
absolutely,
them.
yes, 100%.
Because of toxins.
And he actually says whether it's cultivated or wild, Paul says minimum of 20 minutes of cooking, and in like a medium to medium high heat too, which I know a lot of people say, oh, you're going to cook all the nutrients out of it, but mushrooms, the nutrients are really locked deep inside, so
Yeah.
it does take longer than you would think to actually cook them to make them digestible.
Yeah, I heard that besides the sunlight, that mushrooms are a good source of vitamin D.
Absolutely, and that's one thing I was going to say when we were talking about the cancer stuff, is that they have actually, in the, I think I want to say it's in the Growing Medicinal Mushrooms, Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms book, they actually found that even after shiitake were harvested, if you laid them with the gill side up, I want to say for one day, it was a huge increase in the vitamin D that was in them. And mushrooms grown outside definitely have a higher amount of vitamin D in them. And this doctor that I mentioned earlier, who works at this cancer institute, that she said that they are actually doing studies there that they're using just vitamin D to cure cancers. So it's definitely a good thing to have.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid to go out in the sun because of skin cancer.
Right,
but
right.
apparently, in order to recover from internal cancers,
Right.
you have to spend time in the sun
Well,
to
and
help them go away. You know.
I know the skin doctor where I was for my things was complaining that I was too dark, that it was in the sun too much, but they do say, I mean, 10 to 15 to 20 minutes a day is not a bad idea. But around here, I mean, really from, about Labor Day until, or let's say the only time you would get enough vitamin D from the sun would be between maybe Memorial Day and Labor Day. So most of the rest of the year, it's a good idea for us to supplement here. And actually,
yeah.
I've had my D levels tested for some time now, and I take one pill a week, but it's 50,000 units. I usually take that on a Sunday morning, but yeah, so vitamin D is good, and but yeah, I mean, Paul said, I mean, it's a great source of vitamin D. Any mushrooms, but I know the maitake, the hen of the woods too, and that's one that I was saying that some people will confuse. You say chicken of the woods, oh yeah, maitake. It's like, no, it's hen of the woods is maitake, and maitake is more of a brown gray shelf type mushroom. Grows similarly like on stumps in the woods, but you can imagine, like you said, you can see that bright yellow orange from a distance. It really stands out. But if that was a gray brown mushroom, you could easily pass it by. And I know we're coming up on the season for a very choice edible, the morel mushrooms come out usually, and I've mostly found them in later May, but those are super choice, and I know some friends that have found quite a few of them. Sometimes they call them blonde, the ones. I mean, these are black ones that are on that.
Yeah, why don't you show the books to our viewing audience and say a little about each one?
Yeah, so this. Well, actually, I had to read both of these: the Mushroom Cultivator, and which is one of Paul's older books, and the Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms book before I went and took his class. So I want to say roughly like 1,800 pages or something like that. But this right here is actually a black morel, but the ones that grow around here, they call them white or like a blonde yellow. And you can imagine if you're out in the woods this time of year, there's a lot of dead leaves on the ground, so they're kind of blonde, yellow, tan sort of. And I've known guys that say that they will go out and hunt morel mushrooms, and they're looking around at the base of usually ash and elm and apple. If you can find old apple orchards, that's a lot of times where you'll find them. But they'll say, you're looking, it's like, geez, there's an ash tree, I don't see any. But they say sometimes if you get down low enough, you'll see the shape of the mushroom, whereas if you're looking down on them, they just blend in with everything. So, certain of those edible mushrooms are really hard to find, even, because they'll say it's like you're standing there looking for like several minutes, and then you get down low enough where you actually see the height of the mushroom, but you could easily miss them completely by not looking as carefully as you could. So, and I know for a fact too that they say that a lot of chefs will go out and look for the morel mushrooms and chanterelles in the summer too, but they say that it's really timing a lot of times, because I know I read once this one chef, he went in an area where there was a lot of morels around, didn't find a single thing, and they ended up finding a few days later, he went back to the exact same place a few days later, and there was a flush of them. And I know a lot of times, I have planted morels on my land, but I have never harvested a single morel mushroom yet. But they say if you plant them towards the end of the summer, you could actually get some the next spring. Sometimes they say 6 to 8 months to a couple of years. They say sometimes it takes as many as 8 years for them to actually come. And I don't know of any medicinal value for the morel, but I'm sure there probably isn't. Oh, actually, this one.
What about this book?
Well, that's Mycelium Running. This is more on how mushrooms can help save the world.
On how mushrooms can help save the world.
Yeah. And actually, he actually talked about an area where there was actually a oyster farm, not an oyster mushroom farm, but an oyster farm in Seattle, or near him, probably closer to Olympia. And they said that they had built a road along this sound or whatever it was where these oysters were being raised, and there was a gravelly bank, and every time it rained, it would wash all this gravel and silt and clay into the water where the oysters were being raised. So he calls it mycoremediation, but he took I saw, well, I guess it's a series of pictures in here, but they initially took they had the huge logging type dump trucks, and they brought in sawdust or wood shavings, wood chips, and they raked that out onto the side of this bank where all this bad stuff was getting into the water, put that on there, and then I want to say there was some kind of a mushroom liquid spray that they sprayed over the top of that, but then they put the mushroom spawn on there, raked it in a little bit. They put straw over the top of that to shade it and keep it moist, but then they also threw some sort of grass seed over the top of that, and what ended up happening was the mycelia grew through all the wood chips and sawdust that they put down, which actually makes, if you've ever seen it, it's really kind of neat, but it makes like a three-dimensional webbing of like the root. And actually what the mycelia is actually the mushroom. What we think of as the mushroom, like all of these things, that's the fruit body of the mushroom. So usually when the mushroom itself, which is the mycelia, runs out of food or it's low on water or something like that, that's when it's just like, well, we need to reproduce, so it puts out the fruit body, which will spread the spores so the spores can go elsewhere and find more food. But that webbing acted like a filter, so when the rainwater would come down off of that hill, it would all get filtered through that bed. And as a side benefit, there was a bunch of oyster mushrooms there. But a lot of things that Paul has, I don't know, something like 30 some different U.S. patents on different things. But when I was there, it was right after the big oil spill in the Gulf, and he had actually said what they can do is they will stuff burlap bags full of straw and inoculate that with oyster mushroom spawn. And if you put that into water, the oil gets into the straw and the burlap bag. And then when you pull that out, the oyster mushrooms will grow throughout the whole bag. And they actually have a way of the mushroom actually breaks down the heavy toxic stuff that is actually in the oil. And he showed in here too where I want to say it was like maybe where a big trucking company had been, and there had been a lot of like oils and petroleum products and stuff that were all over this entire area. Well, they cleaned it all up, but they had 4 piles of this soil that had been there, and they gave 4. I think they used one as a control, but they gave Paul 1 pile and then 2 other groups 2 other piles to see what they could do with it. And Paul somehow inoculated his pile with oyster mushroom spawn. And they showed him all the other 3 piles were just dead after, I don't know how many months it was, but his pile, I want to say they inoculated with oyster mushroom spawn, and he said that the oyster mushrooms grew, the bugs came to eat the oyster mushrooms, the birds came to eat the bugs, and birds probably dropped seeds and probably pooped on the pile and stuff. And within a very short amount of time, the pile that Paul had been given was just lush and growing with all kinds of grasses and weeds and stuff like that, whereas everything else, all the other ones were just completely dead, inert because of all the chemicals and all the petroleum products that were in that soil. But
So the mycelium is good for cleaning up toxins in the environment then.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, as a filter, I mean, just alone like that. But yeah, and I mean, certain type of mushrooms do actually do some clean. I mean, you wouldn't want to eat those mushrooms.
Oh, no, definitely
once they're
not.
grown that stuff, because mushrooms are what they call an accumulator, so they will actually pick up toxins from the environment. So. I mean, sometimes I will, but I'm really hesitant to eat a wild mushroom,
Well,
even if I know it's edible.
that's probably why they have anti-cancer benefits
Right.
is, they probably pull toxins out of the body that feed the cancers.
Right. Well, a lot of it is polysaccharides that are in the actual mushrooms themselves that actually will stop. And I can't tell you which mushroom it is, but I know that something that I've read, they actually say that the mushroom itself, it would be really good if everybody who was on chemo took this particular one, which I can't tell you right off the top of my head which one it is, but it actually makes the cancer cells more susceptible to the chemo, so they're more vulnerable to the chemo, but it has a chemoprotective effect to the healthy cells in your body. So,
Really?
So I mean,
Oh my gosh.
it's bad for the cancer and it's good for your other cells. So I don't know why everybody wouldn't take it, but and I know earlier I want to go into the whole pet thing too, because you were saying that your dog has a particular type of cancer, and my old. He was an American Pit Bull Terrier mixed with a Neapolitan Mastiff mix at around 8 years old, which probably was his maximum lifespan anyway for that breed of dog. Ended up with a lymphatic cancer, and a somewhat local regular allopathic vet wanted him on chemotherapy for 6 months. Well, I went to a natural vet, and he got him on a couple different herbs and a homeopathic remedy, which really helped him. But in the end, I had him actually on this cordyceps, and I had him on something called My Community, which is like a 17 mushroom blend, which is supposed to be good for cancers and immune things in general. Perked him right up. He was doing really, really good. He actually, like they say, once a dog gets lymphatic cancer, they generally have 1 to 3 months, usually an average of 2 months to live. And that dog lived for 5 years and 3 months. Last March 8th, he was killed by an inattentive speeding driver in front of my house. Of course, the dog was in the middle of the road eating a dead squirrel too. So, he lived more than 5 years longer than he should have with the particular type of cancer that he had. So, and actually those two, but there's also a product that Paul sells. It's called Mush, and it's a 5 mushroom blend, good for dogs, cats, and horses.
We are down to about 40 seconds left of the program, so we're going to have to
Wrap it up
for now. But Bill and I want to make sure, Bill and I want to make sure that you guys don't go out in the woods without knowing what you're doing and pick mushrooms and eat them. And you can probably contact Bill to ask if he knows where mushroom growing classes are held in this area.
Well, one thing, I haven't done it yet, it's kind of on my bucket list, but Paul actually teaches a class in British Columbia, Columbus Day weekend. It's a 4-day weekend, and he says you will easily be able to identify 25 edible species.
Well, our program really is over now, but thank you for coming. It's been really interesting.
Thanks for having me. It was good talking to you.
You too.